Today we are going to cover one fibrous lesion, which is the commonest, fibrous dysplasia. We'll also cover a benign bone lesion, cystic bone lesion, unicameral bone cyst today. Aneurysmal bone cyst is not so common, so maybe it will be mentioned in differential diagnosis only. Paget's disease and brown tumor of hyperparathyroidism might come up in discussion shortly. Last time we have seen the staging of benign bone tumors, that they can be divided into three types in Enneking grading: latent, active and aggressive. Latent tumors are those which grow slowly and their growth achieves a plateau or a downward slope. So they grow slowly, they remain static, or even heal spontaneously, like osteoid osteoma we have covered in the last lecture. There are certain benign bone tumors which can be classified as active when they have progressive growth, but this growth is limited by natural barriers like cortex, joint capsule, intermuscular compartments, fascia, etc. Whereas aggressive bone tumors, they keep growing and they also cross the natural barriers like giant cell tumor, which we will try to cover today. So the staging of benign bone tumors, I am doing a quick recap because it will be useful in studying the other benign bone tumors that we are going to cover today. Latent forms on X-ray, they don't have any cortical expansion, no cortical thinning, the integrity of the cortex is maintained, and so they are termed as latent, and accordingly they are also usually asymptomatic and an incidental finding on X-ray because they haven't caused any weakness to the normal mechanical integrity of the bone. Whereas active tumors, they their growth is progressive and they cause cortical thinning and expansion. See, it's a ballooned out. So as a result, they can be symptomatic and they may even cause pathological fracture. Whereas the aggressive benign bone tumors, they cross natural barriers like cortex here, and they spill over into the soft tissue or spill over in the neighboring tissues, and so they almost always need some kind of surgical treatment. Treatment again is dependent on the staging of the bone tumors. Latent tumors are usually asymptomatic and incidental finding because they don't cause cortical thinning or expansion, they don't cause destruction of the cortex. So usually an observant treatment can be prescribed for these patients with latent benign bone tumors. Active bone tumors, however, keep growing actively and become symptomatic, become painful, may even cause pathological fracture because of cortical expansion and thinning. So usually what we do is an intralesional excision. We have already covered. I have also already shown what curettage means. It is a type of intralesional excision that we employ in benign bone tumors. And aggressive tumors, however, since they breach the natural anatomical barriers, they spread through the cortex, they might need extended curettage or sometimes even marginal or wide resection. We have seen what intralesional dissection is, what marginal excision is, wide resection. Intralesional excision, where the tumor is removed in a piecemeal fashion from inside the tumor, like in curettage. That is a very common surgery that we perform for benign bone tumors, especially the latent and the active forms. Marginal excision, when we remove the tumor through the inflammatory area or through the pseudocapsule. Wide resection, when we remove the tumor along with a cup of normal tissue, and radical dissection when we remove the whole compartment or the whole bone. Like I have shown this slide already for a benign sarcoma, benign soft tissue tumor. If this is the dark area as the tumor and this striped area is the reactive zone or the pseudocapsule, then if we remove the tumor from the black spot itself, then it is an intralesional or subtotal excision. Marginal excision involves removal of the tumor along its margin. Wide excision takes a cup of normal tissue. Marginal excision, we remove it through its pseudocapsule or the reactive zone or inflammatory zone. Wide excision, we remove it along with a cup of normal tissue, and in radical excision we remove whole of the compartment. And in case of bone tumor, whole of the bone may need to be taken out. A radical amputation may even be necessary if we want to do a radical dissection of a bone tumor. But usually in benign bone tumors, intralesional and wide excision are the two types of surgeries that are usually employed. So how? And surgery, apart from resection, we have to sometimes add reconstruction, we have to sometimes add an endoprosthetic replacement, and sometimes instead of dissection we simply do a reinforcement to prevent pathological fracture if we are suspecting an impending pathological fracture in a benign bone tumor. These are general principles that we have already covered. I have done a quick recap, so it will help in us in understanding the common bone tumors that we are going to study today. This slide I have already shown what intralesional excision means. It's very common surgery. It is known as curettage, almost always employed for benign bone tumors. You can use a handheld curette or a mechanical burr to scoop out the tumor intralesionally in a piecemeal fashion, which gives rise to a huge cavity, and this cavity needs to be reinforced by one or the other method. Either this cavity needs to be filled with either bone cement or bone graft or bone substitute, and when we add some mechanical agent to extend to curettage, then it is known as extended curettage. Why do we do that? As you see, as we have studied that curettage is a form of intralesional excision, so we can remove the tumor that is visible macroscopically or to the naked eye, but microscopic tumor tissue can be left behind. To deal with microscopic tissue, we sometimes use toxic agents like phenol, or we use a thermal cautery which uses heat to destroy the microscopic tumor left behind. Liquid nitrogen, which is very cold, so extremely low temperature kills the microscopic tumor cells that might be left behind. We might use PMMA, which is nothing but polymethyl methacrylate or acrylic bone cement, which setting of the bone cement is an exothermic reaction, so it gives out heat. So when we fill this cavity with bone cement, it does serves two purposes. First of all, it fills the hollow cavity with cement, so reinforces the cavity, reinforces the bone. At the same time, when this cement gets set, it gives out heat, which kills the microscopic tumor cells that might be left behind. So usually the type of surgery that we are going to encounter in benign bone tumors will be one or the other form of intralesional resection, usually curettage, or more likely extended curettage. Common benign bone tumors that we have already covered, like benign osteoma. In orthopedic practice, we usually encounter benign osteomas of the skull, which are usually asymptomatic, and patient might come with a cosmetic blemish. All the symptomatic osteomas are in the sinuses, and they usually go to ENT surgeons. We usually get asymptomatic osteomas. Osteoid osteoma we have already covered in the last lecture, which is a form of latent bone tumor which might heal on its own, and since it doesn't cause cortical thinning or expansion, it doesn't lead to pathological fracture and presents with pain at rest and not pain with activity. A very common benign bone tumor we have covered last time, osteochondroma, which is a cartilage forming bone tumor. It is very common. Up to 35 to 40% of the benign bone tumors that we see in our clinical practice comprise of osteochondromas, seen in second and third decade of life. Start from the ends of bone near growth plate. In the long bones, usually pedunculated like this. You must be remembering this slide. So we have covered this. Its treatment also is covered last time. Today we are going to start a new topic, another common bone tumor, which is known as chondroma. It is a form of a cartilage forming bone tumor. That is, it is a chondrogenic tumor made up of hyaline cartilage, and it usually starts in the medullary cavity. The physis has some chondroblastic dysfunction which gives rise to the formation of this chondromas. It is the second most common benign cartilage lesion. After osteochondroma, we have seen osteochondroma comprises 35 to 40% of the benign bone tumors encountered, while chondromas account for about a quarter of the benign bone tumors that we see, and they comprise of about 12% of biopsy proven primary bone tumors, because not all chondromas need treatment or biopsy. So it can be detected throughout the life, third, fourth and fifth decades of life. But those with multiple lesions are usually younger, in the second or third decades of life, because they present with symptoms earlier because of the multiple tumors. There is no sex predilection, so it's equally common among male and the females. The types, depending on the lesion, it can be an unchondroma or a periosteal chondroma or a cortical chondroma or an intra-articular or soft tissue chondroma. Enchondroma, as the name suggests, it is a tumor of mature haline cartilage that is located centrally within the bone. It is located centrally within the bones, hence the name enchondroma. This is the most common type of chondroma that we encounter, and so the discussion will be primarily about enchondromas. They might also arise from the periosteum when they are known as periosteal chondroma. They might arise beneath the periosteum, that is from the cortex, so they are known as cortical chondromas. If they are intra-articular within the joint, then they are called intra-articular chondromas. Soft tissue variants are called soft tissue chondromas. Sometimes these tumors may undergo malignant transformation, but it is rare in a solitary lesion, more commonly encountered in polyostotic forms. Those patients with multiple chondromas are more likely to show a malignant transformation of the tumor. The common sites are small bones of hands and the feet, comprising about 58% of the lesion in one study. In fact, it happens to be the most common primary bone tumor of the hand. Other locations like distal femur, about 20% of the cases, proximal humerus, about 10% cases, much rarer in tibia, and still rarer in pelvis, scapula and ribs. Whenever we encounter enchondroma in a rare location like pelvis, scapula and ribs, we suspect it to be a chondrosarcoma or a malignant form rather than a benign bone tumor. It is so uncommon in these sites. Presentation can be asymptomatic. Usually it's an incidental finding on radiographs. The patient doesn't come to us for a tumor or a mass or pain. The patient might have come for some other reason. We get an X-ray done, regional X-ray, and incidentally we find that a patient has a chondroma of the hand. So mostly they are asymptomatic, but sometimes they can be painful. Certain atypical chondromas that can be painful, so it is a rarer presentation. Sometimes they can present with fracture, but even with fracture, sometimes this fracture is also an incidental finding. So they might have a pathological fracture but still be asymptomatic. But usually with pathological fracture, they might present with pain. So we have seen, just like osteochondromatosis, which can be solitary versus multiple, enchondromas can also be solitary, as well as there can be patients with multiple enchondromas. Multiple enchondromatosis, also known as Ollier's disease. Sometimes patients with multiple osteochondromas also have accompanying angiomas of the soft tissues, and then it becomes Maffucci's syndrome. Sarcomatous transformation, malignant transformation of the enchondromas can occur with both Ollier's disease and Maffucci's syndrome, but it is rarer with the solitary enchondromas, occurring in less than 1% of those patients with solitary enchondromas. So it is more common in malignant transformation is more common in polyostotic forms. This is a clinical as well as X-ray of a patient with multiple enchondromas. As we have discussed, that it is a tumor of the small bones of hands, usually so multiple enchondromas in all the metacarpals. And this is perhaps a patient with Maffucci syndrome with some soft tissue, and this is a gross specimen. Histologically, enchondromas have hypocellular stroma and few double nucleated cells. Binucleated cells are characteristic finding in histological picture of an enchondroma, but the marrow is not permeated. It doesn't spread to the marrow. It is a very key finding in enchondromas, because if it permeates through the cortex into the soft tissue, the diagnosis becomes that of an chondrosarcoma. So histologically, enchondroma and chondrosarcoma have very little differentiating features. There is no myxoid change in the matrix. Calcification and ossification is common, and histological appearance, as I have already mentioned, that it might resemble a grade 1 chondrosarcoma. To differentiate, if we notice permeation through the cortex into the soft tissue, then we make a diagnosis of chondrosarcoma. Otherwise, histologically, the features of enchondroma are very similar to a grade 1 chondrosarcoma with binucleate, double nucleated cells. Characteristic histological finding of enchondroma. Radiologically, usually the lesions are small, especially since they are occurring in small bones of hands and feet. So less than 5 centimeters small. Like most benign tumors, these are lytic lesions, geographic lesions, well-defined margins. Usually they are central and metaphyseal to start with. So see, this is the bone end, this is epiphyseal part of the bone, this is metaphyseal part, the central part is known as diaphyseal part. So usually they start from metaphyseal part, but as they grow, they can grow towards the metaphysis, and this distinction is lost, whether it is a metaphyseal or central. So usually it is metaphyseal in location and central in location. As we have seen in histology, that calcification can occur. Calcification in all chondroid tumors, whether chondrosarcoma or benign tumors like enchondroma, if there is chondroid calcification, it has a characteristic finding on X-ray which is known as rings and arcs calcification, popcorn-like calcification. So whenever chondroid tumor they show calcification, they have a typical characteristic of rings and arcs type of calcification in all chondroid tumors, including enchondroma. Matrix mineralization is not seen, so they are usually purely lytic. Expansile, see they have expanded the cortex. Endosteal scalloping may be there, and they usually don't go through the cortex, so they are active lesions and they respect the natural boundaries like cortex, so they don't breach cortex usually unless pathological fracture happens. Another X-ray of enchondroma of proximal femur, see the metaphyseal location, central location, and you see rings and arcs of calcification, which is a chondroid form of calcification seen in the X-ray of chondroid tumors, also seen in chondrosarcoma. So there is no gross bone destruction, no periosteal reaction, no soft tissue mass. Why no soft tissue mass? Because it is an active form of tumor, not an aggressive form of tumor, so it respects the natural barriers like cortex, doesn't break through the cortex to spill over into the soft tissues. Usually they start from metaphysis. Why? Because their origin is presumed to be from the growth plate, from here, from the physis. Cartilage cells in the physis may be the site where the enchondromas originate, so they are usually found in the metaphysis. Rings and arc calcification seen here. Very rarely they are seen in epiphysis. But when they are located in the epiphysis, you should always suspect it to be a case of chondrosarcoma rather than enchondroma. So it is rarer in epiphysis, mostly in the metaphysis. Pathophysiology, they represent incomplete endochondral ossification of chondroblast and fragments of epiphyseal cartilage which escape from the physis. So they originate from the physis. From these cells of physis they originate epiphyseal cartilage, and they originate from the physis and they displace into metaphysis and proliferate there and give rise to a metaphyseal mass. The pathophysiology of associated conditions like Ollier's disease, also known as multiple enchondromatosis. Ollier's disease has sporadic inheritance, no genetic predisposition, so there is no history of similar condition in the family. Since these tumors originate from the physis, multiple enchondromas mean that there will also be disturbance of the physis or disturbance of the growth, giving rise to what is known as skeletal dysplasia, which is abnormal growth of the bone, because the tumors are originating from the growing part of the bone known as physis. Multiple osteochondromas almost always have some form of growth disturbance known as skeletal dysplasia, and these patients will have enchondromas throughout the metaphysis and diaphysis of long bones. Bones are dysplastic, as I have mentioned, giving then these growth abnormalities give rise to shortening, bowing, various deformities close to the joints. The risk of malignant transformation, which was only 1%, less than 1% in Solitary enchondromas becomes as high as 30% in multiple enchondromatosis Olier's disease. However, Maffucci syndrome can have as high as 100% risk of malignant transformation. So almost every Maffucci syndrome patient with multiple osteochondromatosis along with multiple angiomas, soft tissue angiomas, have a very high risk, almost 100% risk of malignant transformation. They also have a higher risk of visceral malignancies like astrocytoma, GI malignancy, etc. Maffucci syndrome, just like Olier's disease, have sporadic inheritance, no genetic predisposition, and their radiologically their enchondromas cause marked expansion of the bone, like the figure we have seen here. Marked expansion of the bone. Maffucci syndrome usually cause marked expansion of the bone as compared to the solitary enchondromas. Management, as we have seen, it is an active form of a tumor, so at times, a lot of times it is asymptomatic, and hence a lot of patients qualify for non-surgical treatment in the form of observation of monitoring, but they need regular monitoring, regular follow-up, periodic X-rays to see if the tumor grows. If the tumor grows and grows progressively at a fast pace, we have to suspect malignant transformation. Very rarely it is asymptomatic, and when in these patients they need an intralesional excision known as curettage. We have already seen what curettage is. So in curettage we scrape the tumor from the bone, and once the tumors are removed, there is very low chance of recurrence. Sometimes they present with a pathological fracture. In those cases we allow the fracture to heal before doing a curettage on the tumor. Usually after curettage, the resultant bone cavity that is left behind is filled with bone graft. The bone graft can be taken from the donor when it forms allograft, or it can be taken from another bone in the patient's same patient's body, autograft. We can also use bone graft substitutes like hydroxyapatite, bone cement, etc. Very rarely we encountered a very aggressive tumor with bone destruction, and these are usually those enchondromas that have undergone malignant transformation to become chondrosarcomas, and hence they need wide or radical resection depending upon the grading of the tumor. Another common benign bone tumor, which is not actually a tumor but a true bone cyst, which is known as unicameral bone cyst or UBC, also known as simple bone cyst or solitary bone cyst. They are common benign cystic lesion of children and adolescents. They are characterized by benign fluid-filled cavities that grow and cause cortical thinning and thinning of the bone. Usually they are seen in the metaphysis of the long bones in patients with open physis, in skeletally mature individuals. Usually they are more aggressive in the first decade of life, and they usually stop growing after the skeletal maturity, after the growth ceases. And recurrence rate of these patients in the first decade is 4 times higher than that of adolescents, because it is more aggressive in the first decade of life when the growth potential is highest. Proximal and humerus and femur are the most common site, accounting for as much as 90% of these cases. So in proximal humerus or femur, if you encounter a cystic lesion in the metaphysis in the first or second decades of life, it is very likely to be a unicameral bone cyst. Epidemiology, 80% of these occur in children and adolescents, that is first and second decades of life, before skeletal maturity, before fusion of the physis. Peak occurs between the ages of 3 and 14 years as reported. Reportedly the mean age of diagnosis is 9 years approximately. They represent about 3% of all biopsied bone tumors. twice as common in males as compared to females. Genetically, it is caused by a single single case translocation T16 to 20, P11.2 to Q13, and it is reportedly found in a 11-year-old boy. Clinical presentation, as we have already discussed, that it is more aggressive in the first decade of life, 4 times more likely to recur in the first decade as compared to the second decade when they are adult, when the patient is an adolescent. So more aggressive in the first decade of life, recurrence rate is also higher, 4 times higher, we have already discussed. Usually they are painless, so 80% of them are asymptomatic. They become symptomatic only when the bone has been weakened sufficiently for a pathological fracture to happen. So usually when the patient has no history of trauma, patient may present with mild pain or local tenderness. Occasionally a swelling can be seen because these are expansile lesion. And a lot of patients, almost 80% of the patients, are usually asymptomatic, and the diagnosis is made on an incidental finding on X-rays. Can be seen in almost every bone, but 95% of them are in the long bones, of which 90% are in the proximal humerus and femur itself, and proximal femur itself responsible for 80% of the UBCs. As the growth ceases, they tend to disappear. So after puberty, when skeletal maturity is achieved, unicameral bone cysts stop growing. So when they are within 1 centimeter of the physis, they are active. They become latent as they progress to a diaphyseal location. Why, we are going to see later. So because usually ABCs start in the metaphysis in proximity to the physis, and in the case of greater trochanter, it is from the apophysis of the greater trochanter, and as they start growing, the unicameral bone cysts start moving distally towards the diaphysis, and they might even reach to the center of the humeral diaphysis. Proximal femur cysts rarely descend below the proximal diaphysis. Some rare forms of UBCs, about 6 to 10%, can be reported in flat bones. And the bone cysts in the flat bones usually present later, may even present in the 3rd decade of life. The late presentation is because of their location, they are protected from the trauma, and so they remain asymptomatic for a long time. So they present later. So what happens? Unicameral bone cysts usually start from close to the physis, and as the child grows, new bone is added here. New bone is it keeps getting added here from the physis, which is the growth plate. So as the kid grows and new bones gets added in the metaphysis, the cysts migrate towards the diaphysis. They can reach even up to the center of the humeral diaphysis. However, those in the proximal femur don't migrate that down. Those in the proximal femur, they rarely descend below the proximal diaphysis. However, humeral cysts can migrate up to the center of the humeral diaphysis with growth. So when the kid is younger, in the first decade of life, the UBC lie closer to the physis and it is an active form. As the growth potential of the kid gets less and less with growing age, the tumor has migrated towards the diaphysis, and the tumor usually becomes latent by this time. So it's the closer to the physis the tumor is, the more active it is likely to be. This is a gross specimen of a simple bone cyst. You can notice that it has a well demarcated cystic cavity, cystic hollow cavity, and it is located in the medullary cavity, not in the cortex, the central part of the bone, long bone. There is cortical thinning. The cortex is thinned over here compared to the thick cortex here. See, the cortex is thick here. The tumor has thinned the cortex over here, and it is lined by a glistening membrane. Histopathologically, the cyst wall, the glistening membrane that we are seeing here, how does it look microscopically? It lacks an epithelial lining. It is not lined by epithelium, but it is composed of fibrovascular stroma, and it has osteoclast type of multinucleated giant cell. So the lining has a fibrovascular stroma with multinucleated giant cells. As we have seen that this tumor causes thinning of the cortex, so at times with natural loading of the bone, with day-to-day activities, a pathological fracture might result at a weak point of the bone where the cortex has been thinned out sufficiently. And when so usually in histopathology we see the result of the fracture. The fracture complicates, gives rise to secondary changes in the histopathology, like we can see hemorrhage, hemosiderin and foamy histiocytes, granulocytes, cholesterol clefts, fibrin, calcification, reactive bone formation, all can result if the pathological fracture has taken place through the cystic cavity. This slide will keep coming back to it over and over to revise it. This is a patient with open physis. This is the patient with a closed physis. This is epiphysis, metaphysis, diaphysis. Patient with open physis less than 30 years of age. Patient with closed physis, skeletal maturity has been reached. And where is our simple bone cyst? It lies here. Metaphyseal region, location, central location in an open physis. In an open physis, metaphyseal location, central location, simple bone cyst, SBC. So we see here radiological feature, open physis. This is the growth plate. This is the growth plate. As the kid will grow, new bone will be added here, and this unicameral bone cyst, simple bone cyst will keep migrating towards the diaphysis because new bone will be added here. Since it is within 1 centimeter of the physis, it is an active form of disease right now at this juncture of time. Radiologically, we will find simple bone cyst in skeletally immature patients. Physis is open, skeletally immature. In the metaphyseal part, abutting the growth plate. See, it is abutting this is growth plate. It is abutting the growth plate, but it keeps moving towards the diaphysis with growth. Typically intramedullary, central, and its long axis here is parallel to the long axis of the bone. Long axis of the tumor is parallel to the long axis of the bone. We will see later how it is just the opposite in the case of aneurysmal bone cyst or ABC, where the long axis is perpendicular to the long axis of the bone. The long axis of this tumor is parallel to the long axis of the bone. Because of the central location, cortical breaks are less common, so soft tissue components are less common because it is central. If it is an eccentric tumor, the eccentric tumor are more likely to cause cortical thinning and cortical breach and spilling over into the soft tissue to give rise to soft tissue tumor. So usually it is less likely to cause cortical break and less likely to cause soft tissue component in the case of UBC, but it can happen. So it might have started from the growth plate, abutting the growth plate here. This UBC might have started over here, abutting the growth plate here in the first decade of life, but as the child has grown, the tumor has migrated, the cyst has migrated towards the diaphysis. So what all other findings that we see? It is a lucent osteolytic lesion. It is an osteolytic lesion. Most bone tumors are osteolytic. Well-defined geographic lesion, narrow zone of transition. The zone of transition is narrow, well-defined, can be traced with a pencil. There is no periosteal reaction happening anywhere, no soft tissue component anywhere. But expansion of the cortex can happen, as we can see here very well. The cortex has been expanded like a balloon, small balloon. Cortical thinning, cortex is thin here, it is thicker here. Usually breach of cortex doesn't happen because it is an active form of tumor that respects the natural barriers. But the cortex is breached only when the pathological fracture happens. And when the pathological fracture happens, we can get something which is very characteristic of a simple bone cyst, almost diagnostic of a simple bone cyst, which is known as a fallen fragment sign. So we see here a case with pathological fracture, cortical breach has happened here. So this is a simple bone cyst, metaphyseal location, and it has caused thinning of the cortex here, and a pathological fracture has taken place here. This is the pathological fracture, and here pathological fracture has taken place here, and we see a fallen fragment. This fallen fragment is gravity dependent, because this is a fluid filled cavity So this is gravity dependent. If we take the X-ray with the patient standing, the swollen fragment will be seen here. If we take with the patient lying down supine, that this fragment might be seen here. This is gravity dependent fallen fragment sign, almost diagnostic of simple bone cyst. Differential diagnosis of unicameral bone cyst includes aneurysmal bone cyst or ABC, fibrous dysplasia. We are going to cover later, and chondroma we have already covered. Eosinophilic granuloma and less common rarer tumors like intraocular ganglia. So how to differentiate it from aneurysmal bone cysts? As compared to a simple bone cyst which has central location, a unicameral bone cyst usually starts from an eccentric location. It can become, with expansion it can become central, but when it starts it is an eccentric location, and its transverse diameter is wider than the epiphyseal plate. We are going to see in the next slide. And MRI shows double density fluid levels. Can also be, this double density fluid levels is also almost diagnostic of aneurysmal bone cyst. It can also be seen on X-ray sometimes and on a CT scan. Double density fluid levels are diagnostic of ABC. So they start with eccentric location as compared to simple bone cyst, which are always central and abutting the so these are eccentric, and their transverse diameter is wider than the epiphyseal plate. Transverse diameter is wider than the epiphyseal plate. This is epiphyseal plate, and the transverse diameter is wider than the epiphyseal plate in ABC, whereas in simple bone cyst it is less than. This is the epiphyseal plate, the transverse diameter is less, and the longitudinal axis of the tumor is parallel to the longitudinal axis of the bone. Another differential diagnostic tumor is fibrous dysplasia. The matrix of fibrous dysplasia shows what is known as the ground glass appearance. What is a ground glass? Glass, as you might be knowing, is a transparent structure. We can see through it, but sometimes we use ground glass for window panes so that we cannot see anything from the other side. So this is what ground glass looks like. The translucent glass that sometimes is used in the window panes, which is not transparent. You cannot see through it. Light can enter, but we cannot see through it. So that glass is known as ground glass, and the matrix has a ground glass appearance in fibrous dysplasia. This is how we differentiate it from the simple bone cyst, which has very complete lytic cavity. The treatment of unicameral bone cyst, the aim of our treatment is to prevent pathological fracture, to manage pathological fracture if pathological fracture has already happened, to promote healing of the cyst, to prevent recurrence of the cyst once it has healed, prevent refracture once the fracture has healed. So most simple bone cysts present without any symptoms and are incidental finding on X-rays, and those of such asymptomatic individuals which have very low risk of pathological fracture, there are certain signs which help us in identifying on X-ray if the patient has low risk of pathological fracture. If the patient has low risk of pathological fracture, we can offer a non-operative treatment and observe the patient with regular follow-up and X-rays, and treat the patient only when the risk of pathological fracture takes place. So non-operative treatment. Another form of non-operative treatment is immobilization, where we offer patient a plaster or a brace. This type of treatment is employed for those upper limb simple bone cysts which have presented with pathological fracture. So upper limb simple bone cyst with pathological fracture may not need surgery, can be treated by plaster and bracing, upper limb. But operative treatment is reserved for those with obvious or suspected pathological fracture in lower limbs, or the cyst is progressively going in size and we are suspecting that there is an impending pathological fracture. Certain cysts are very high risk of pathological fracture, like proximal femur, because of high biomechanical stress at the proximal femur. Even a cyst which appears relatively benign, we might offer surgery to prevent a pathological fracture, because even benign looking cyst can give rise to, even small cyst with no little cortical thinning can give rise to pathological fracture in proximal femur. The proximal femur cysts are almost always offered surgery. Otherwise it is reserved for those with pathological fracture, with obvious or suspected pathological fracture in the lower limb. In the upper limb, even if pathological fracture, we can offer the patient a non-operative treatment in the form of a plaster or brace. So the treatment One of the treatment that has become very popular these days is intralesional injection of either steroids or bone marrow. Because of an initial report, an initial paper by Scaglialetti and all dated 1974, which had shown 90% favorable results, but newer studies are showing that it is not possible to recreate the good results that they had given. So nowadays it is slowly going out of favor, because there are studies which have reported a recurrence rate of 15 to 88%. So but this intralesional injection of steroid and bone marrow is still quite popular for the treatment of simple bone cyst. A lot of time the treatment that is offered to these patients is curettage, which is an intralesional excision we have already seen, and we fill the resultant cavity with the bone graft, but these are known to have very low healing rate of about a quarter to one-third of the cases. So only a quarter, one-third of the cases heal with curettage and bone grafting. So usually what we do, we add local adjuvant to the curettage and bone grafting. What is local adjuvant? And we have already seen what we had described as extended curettage. We add, in the case of bone cyst, in addition to curettage, we add some form of intramedullary decompression. We decompress the cyst cavity, we puncture the cyst cavity, because it has been found to improve healing of the cyst. In fact, certain people suggest that the good results of intralesional injections had nothing to do with steroids or bone marrow, but with the act of puncturing the cyst. So what we do nowadays, we decompress the cyst in various forms, and we add calcium sulfate and phenol. So adding calcium sulfate and phenol can improve the healing rates to as high as 90%. So you see, simple curettage and bone grafting, only a quarter to a third of the patient show healing of the cyst, whereas the healing rate goes up to 90% if we add intramedullary decompression, calcium sulfate and phenol. Sometimes we offer a patient at surgery which percutaneous decompression, in which a needle is placed in the cyst at various sites percutaneously without giving any incision. Healing rates are all up to 70%, which is quite good as compared to curettage and bone grafting, but we have much better result when we do a decompression and add an implant like cannulated screw or flexible intramedullary lead, which keep the cavity decompressed all the times. So percutaneous decompression is one-time decompression. You put a needle in the cyst and you puncture it. But when we add a decompression, an implant to decompression like cannulated screw or flexible intramedullary nail through the cyst cavity, it leads to continuous decompression of the cavity, and so the healing rate has improved reportedly as high as 73% to 77%. And adding calcium sulfate can improve the healing rate of intramedullary decompression with implant to as high as 92%. So these are all. So successful treatment usually involves either intramedullary decompression, adding calcium sulfate and phenol, or decompression plus implant. Another common fibrous dysplasia is one of the common forms of the most common form of the fibrous lesions of the bone, but very uncommon bone disorder as such, in which fibrous tissue replaces the normal bone tissue. It is a form of dysplasia which happens by replacement of normal bone tissue in the medullary cavity with fibrous tissue. And since the normal bone tissue has been replaced with the fibrous tissue, it causes weakening of the bone and might lead to progressive deformity of the bone or even fracture, also known as Lichtenstein's-Jaffe's disease, after the people who have first described it in 1920s. Though it is the commonest of the most fibrous lesions of the bone, but it is rarest as compared to all the benign bone tumors, comprising only 7% of all the benign bone tumors. It is a type of congenital process wherein there is localized defect in the osteoblastic differentiation. So the bone forming tumors are defective and their mutation is defective, so they get replaced by the normal bone gets replaced with fibrostoma but it does have islands of immature woven bone which is not as strong as the completely woven bone. It is a genetic disorder caused by gene mutation, but it is not hereditary, so it is not passed from parent to child, so it is caused by sporadic mutation which is not hereditary. Usually seen in children and young adults. 75% of the patients present before the third decade of life, before the fourth decade of life, before the age of 30 years. Highest incidence is between 3 and 15 years of age. However, polyostotic forms, the patient usually present earlier, even by 10 years of age. May equal predilection of male and female involvement. So fibrous dysplasia can also be monostotic and polyostotic type. 78 to 80% of the cases fall into the first category, solitary types. And since they are solitary, just like solitary and chondromas, they remain asymptomatic until second and third decades of life. But they can present at any age, even in the adulthood. Like most benign bone tumors, these tumors become inactive after puberty when skeletal maturity has reached and the growth ceases. Monostotic form does not progress to polyostotic form. Polyostotic or multiple fibrous dysplasias account for remaining 20 to 30% of the cases where multiple bones are involved. Like most polyostotic type, they present earlier in the first decade. Mean age of presentation being 8 years according to reports, and they are more likely to be symptomatic. 2/3 of them are symptomatic by the age of 10. The common site for monostotics are ribs, proximal femur, tibia, craniofacial bones, humerus. Polyostotic forms are usually unilateral and monomelic. So usually when you see polyostotic, they won't be distributed all over the body, but usually on one side of the body, in fact even one limb. So the common site being femur, tibia, pelvis, foot, ribs and skull and facial bones, upper extremities, clavicle, cervical spine. So more diffuse presentation in polyostotic form. This slide we keep coming back to. Where is fibrous dysplasia here? This is open physis, this is epiphysis, growth plate, metaphysis, and this is fibrous dysplasia in the diaphysis. Central location in diaphysis usually. Histopathologically, they are characterized by a low to moderately cellular fibrous stroma which are surrounded by curvilinear trabeculae of woven bone. This woven bone is arranged in a very specific pattern which is referred to as resembling Chinese character. This is woven bone, curvilinear trabeculae of woven bone resembling Chinese characters. There is conspicuous absence of osteoblastic rimming. Radiology: smooth and homogeneous lesion, well circumscribed lesion, sclerotic borders, well defined borders. See sclerotic well defined border, ground glass matrix. Rarely it can also present with completely lucent matrix or cystic matrix, just like a unicameral bone cyst, or sometimes it can even present with a sclerotic matrix, but more often than not it is a mixture of the two which appears as a ground glass appearance here. No periosteal reaction. It can present with cortical thinning because the tumor is expansile, but the cortex remains intact in spite of all the thinning. It may deform, like it has deformed here. This is proximal femur. It has deformed. It has become crooked. It has been curved, but cortex remains intact towards the end. Shepherd's crook deformity and rind sign. This is what looks like a shepherd's crook, a stick that shepherds used to herd their sheep. The rind sign. This is rind sign. There is a peripheral sclerotic rind sign. So this is what shepherd's crook look like. Shepherds use it to herd their sheep. The bone becomes crooked like a shepherd's crook. More, it is better visible here, just like looking like a shepherd's crook. Treatment: like all benign bone tumors, when they are asymptomatic, we offer an the choice of non-operative treatment to the patient. Operative treatment is offered to those who are symptomatic and they are not responding to conservative management, or if there is a risk of pathological fracture, or pathological fracture has already happened which might be undisplaced or even displaced, or progressive deformities taking place like we have seen the case of proximal femur in the previous slide. In high risk zone, presence of large, we have already seen in simple bone cyst, the proximal femur, because of high mechanical, biomechanical stresses in this region, is a high risk zone. Even a benign looking lesion in this area can lead to pathological fracture. So we offer surgery to these patients, or when we are suspecting a malignant transformation, patient is offered surgery. Non-operative treatment like benign bone tumors consists of observation with regular follow-up. A new treatment modality that has come up comprises of a class of drugs known as bisphosphonates, which reduce osteoclastic activity. Bracing and plaster is offered, but recent reports are suggesting that it is usually ineffective in either preventing pathological fracture or preventing progression of deformity. So it is mentioned for the sake of mentioning, but usually we don't offer this. Operative treatment, like all benign tumors, we do an intralesional excision known as curettage. Usually we add bone graft or bone graft substitute to fill the resultant cavity. Sometimes in addition to bone graft we have to add some form of metallic implant to support the weakened bone till the tumor site gets filled with normal bone. Implants alone are used in certain cases where we are suspecting an impending pathological fracture. So instead of curating out the bone, the tumor, we simply put a intramedullary implant which is known as prophylactic internal fixation, which supports the weakened bone till skeletal maturity happens and the tumor heals by itself. I had also planned to cover giant cell tumor today, but maybe we will have to cover it in the next lecture. So we have covered 4 types of benign bone tumors apart from solitary benign osteoma, which is an insignificant type of tumor. We have covered osteochondroma, we have covered osteoid osteoma, we have covered enchondroma, and unicameral bone cyst and fibrous dysplasia. In the next lecture we will try to cover giant cell tumor and some common malignant bone tumors like osteosarcoma, Ewing sarcoma, maybe multiple myeloma as well if time permits. Thank you.